Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I have the Nike GT Cut 2.0. Now, the first version of this shoe got a ton of hype and a lot of good press for its performance characteristics. However, the GT Cut line is not without its pitfalls, and they are definitely not for everyone, and there are a lot of things you need to know about this shoe before you go out and buy them. So let's get into them. Now, the first thing you'll notice on the GT Cut 2 is kind of the futuristic uppers of them. The heel counter is completely external. Now, it does look pretty stiff here when you get more plantar toward the bottom of the shoe. However, the heel counter is really flexible in the back of the heel, allows a lot of motion, which is a theme we're gonna see a lot in this shoe. As well as when you move into the mid and forefoot of the shoe, it's just an entire upper of woven tubular mesh with more kind of patches of more dense woven, kind of fabric woven paneling on it. And it is pretty flexible and see-through. I mean, it is really breathable, but when you look at it under the microscope, you do kind of see just these kind of TPU or kind of plastic tubules going, and then kind of interspersings of more woven or fabric mesh, and that's what creates all the stability in the shoe. And even though this is a more stable type of mesh upper, it still doesn't have the more aggressive paneling of some other basketball shoes that will give you more containment. So once again, one more thing in this shoe that's allowing a little bit more motion. And if you look at that woven mesh combo on the upper durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, kind of a surprise, the Dremel bit right through it. On some of other Nike's woven and mesh uppers, as well as some of their Leno weaves, are a little bit stronger. On this one, it got underneath that layer into kind of the base layer of the uppers. So if you are a really aggressive toe dragger on outdoor courts, get ready for this to start getting exposed and your toes to start getting exposed pretty quick, because this is a little bit more of a flexible, a little bit more of a thin type upper. The one super nice thing about the uppers though is the shoelaces they give you. They are super strong, really bulky, a little bit flatter, so they do tie down a little bit better. So you are getting a little bit more of a premium shoelace, which is really nice. Tongue is neoprene, so it does tie down a little bit better. It is a little thin, however, I didn't have any problems with pinching. However, the laces are outrigger, even though they are double reinforced, so that kind of does add a little more durability to that. But getting into the midsole teardown, this is where the GT Cut and the GT Cut 2 really diverge from a lot of other shoes, as it is a drop-in midsole shoe. Now, just the basics of here, you got a React drop-in midsole with a really small zoom air unit here in the back of the heel, which you actually can feel, and then you get a full-length zoom strobel unit under that. Now, you do get a shank that is rear foot based, however, because there is so much foam and air under you, you don't feel it, so it doesn't really give you any heel pain. However, it only goes right here to the midfoot, so it is more of a back-loaded shank, which gives the rear foot a little bit more stiffness, but it also gives the forefoot a lot more freedom. But the real fork in the road in these shoes comes, obviously in the React foam drop-in midsole. Now, drop-in midsoles have a lot of really interesting performance characteristics, a lot of interesting biomechanical characteristics that I like to look at as a foot doctor, but also a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of pros and cons to these, and you have to see where you fall along that dividing line to see if these are really gonna work for you. Now, starting with the pros, a drop-in midsole is gonna give you so many more degrees of freedom. So if you are somebody with super shifty footwork, somebody that plays really low to the ground, like if you've ever seen the professor on YouTube, how he gets super low, he's almost in a squat when he's dribbling. This shoe is gonna give all of your joints just a little bit more freedom because the midsole isn't attached to the shoe. It's not a ton, but it's enough to allow some of those joints to just get a little bit more motion if you're flexible enough for it. You also have to have a lot of internal stability just in your foot and legs. You have to have really strong leg and foot muscles and just a lot of flexibility in your feet, legs, knees, hips, and even back. Now, the bad part about that is it gives you all those degrees of freedom. So if you are somebody who's a little bit more heavy-footed, somebody who has a lot of instability, someone who has more of a hypermobile foot, someone that needs a little bit more stability underneath of you, well, that drop-in midsole is going to allow a lot more motion and therefore a lot more abnormal motion if you are prone to that. So someone that's an ankle sprainer is going to want to sprain in these a lot more because the midsole is just moving with you. So the shoe isn't moving as one unit versus some other shoes will have a little bit more of a stiff combination where it's sewn in. The shoe sometimes will stop and contain your foot with a stronger upper, whereas these with a little more flexible uppers, flexible heel counter, and then a ton of motion through the drop-in midsole is just going to allow your foot to move any which way. Now, that is great if you are somebody with, like I said, can really kind of have a lot of balance on the court. However, it can go the complete opposite way. Also, if you look at the jump height test, only 37.5 centimeters on these because the shoe does not move as one unit. So this shank is really flexible here in the rear foot, but when you're hitting jump shots a lot, right, you're pushing off of the forefoot. Now you do have a lot more foam here under the forefoot in the drop-in midsole. As you can see, it's thin in the rear foot and then a little bit fatter here in the forefoot. However, that's not going to give you a lot of push-off force. So when you're jumping, what happens is your foot moves, then the drop-in midsole moves, and then the rest of the shoe moves once your foot comes in contact with the uppers. It's not like other shoes where the whole shoe moves as one unit, like the Jordan 36 with the Eclipse plate. So you're going to have to watch. These shoes are meant much more for footwork, not so much for an air assault. And getting off my drop-in midsole soapbox, if you look at the outsole tread, a really interesting kind of hodgepodge of designs. You have more of an arrow pattern here in the heel. That's a traditional just black dyed rubber. Then if you get into the forefoot, you have this ladder pattern herringbone tread. What that means is it is a herringbone, but it's also cut in on each level. So as the shoe starts breaking down and as the rubber starts wearing, you are still getting ridges in the herringbone. So it kind of retains some more of its grip over the life of the shoe. It also has a much deeper tread pattern, which is really interesting. As you get into the very tip of the forefoot, you get into more of a translucent rubber with more kind of those punched out arrows. But the most interesting part of the outsole tread is its durability profile. If you look at the durometer or test of hardness, the back rubber comes in at an 11, the orange rubber comes in at a 16.3, and the translucent rubber comes in at a 9.7. And if you look at the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, it's really neat. It really kind of backs it up. If you look at the back rubber, the black dyed rubber, comes about millimeter of damage on a 2 millimeter tread depth. If you look at the orange rubber, almost a millimeter of damage on a 4 millimeter tread depth. And then you go to the translucent rubber, almost a millimeter and a half on a 3 millimeter tread depth. And if you translate all those stats to performance, looking at the shuttle test, I only came in at 14.87 seconds. However, I don't really think it was the rubber that was the problem. Number one, the push-off force in this isn't as great, and the shoe is so bottom heavy because there's just so much stuff on the bottom of the shoe. Plus, the rubber needs significant warming in the place you're going to pivot most, which is on the orange rubber. Even on an indoor hardwood court, this rubber needed a lot more time to warm. It actually did feel slick at times, especially when trying to pivot off the back rubber before it kind of warmed up. So you can find grip in these. However, it is a much more flowing outsole. It does not have a lot of hard grip to it. It is much more meant for fluid footwork. Ironically enough, it's not meant for cutting. They just don't cut very hard, but that's kind of necessary because if the shoe did cut and stop really fast, if it was a little more tacky, then because of the drop-in midsole allowing more motion, your foot would just roll over the shoe. So the shoe kind of needs to give a little bit, almost like the Curry Flow 9, and that's what produces really any and all stability in the shoe. So for a shoe that's called the GT Cut, doesn't cut all that well. And with that, looking at the fit of the GT Cut 2, it was really surprising. These were not as narrow and constricting as I thought they would be. I think because the upper is a little bit more expandable, you can fit a little more foot types in here. So a narrow and medium foot, you can go true to size. There is a little bit more of an inflare in that shoe. However, if you are a 2E, I think going up a half size probably be okay. But if you are over a 2E, I probably just would look somewhere else because going up a whole size in these is going to be a lot of shoe. It's gonna start getting really bottom heavy on you, and your foot just might not line up to where that fattest part of the foam is, so you might start getting some abnormal motion in these shoes. But I think the biggest pitfall in these shoes is for somebody with an ailing foot. If you are somebody with more of a hypermobile flat foot, tendonitis, arch pain, arch strain, Achilles tendonitis, ankle spraining, this shoe is just not meant for an ailing foot. It is meant for performance and performance only. So I think if you're somebody with a little more of heel pain or ball of foot pain only, just strictly plantar pain, they're going to be okay because React foam is so nice. You got the Zoom Strobel underneath of there, so they are cushioned enough for you. However, anything with more of a strain type injury is going to have an issue in this shoe just because it allows for so much motion. Plus, with a drop-in midsole, you can't put an orthotic in them over top of it, or it'd be like a balancing pagoda. So these shoes have to be worn as is, and if you're somebody that needs a little more augmentation or someone that needs a little bit more support, you probably just want to look somewhere else. And so that being said, who are the best players for the GT Cut 2? People that play very low to the ground, someone that needs a lot of shifty footwork, and someone that wants to use the most motion that their body will allow, because these shoes will allow a lot of motion. So you can get super creative with your footwork in these, and you can do things that other shoes will just not allow you to do. You'll just roll over them, or you'll kind of start stumbling over your feet. Whereas in these, the center of gravity will kind of stay true if you're kind of moving all over the place. And that's what's good about having a shoe with a really low center of gravity and a lot of bottom heavy materials, is that your foot can kind of move all over the place, the shoe will stay on the ground, and your foot can kind of move around and kind of get out of your own way. But with that being said, if you are someone that is just needing a little bit more jump force, a little more assistance, you're someone that plays center, playing in the paint a lot and trying to go up for a lot of rebounds, these just aren't going to give you the assist of some other shoes. So just kind of watch out for that. These are much more meant for people playing low to the ground and trying to outwork people with footwork, or if you're trying to blow past your opponent before they know that you have the ball. And the most interesting thing I found about the playability of these is that they grip every surface pretty much equally. They need warming on every single surface. Pretty much any court you put these on, you're going to get the same profile. So they do stay incredibly consistent, which is pretty interesting. And remember, my thoughts on these come more from the foot doctor perspective. Remember, I didn't play college basketball. I definitely am not playing NBA ball. However, I will take a try if anybody wants to give me one. However, you know, these shoes are meant for more of an advanced player, and there are players that find these just an incredible performance shoe. So if you are one of those players, I would love to hear from you in the comments, just kind of see kind of what you can extract from these shoes and kind of what they give you versus some other shoes. So if you are one of those players, let me know in the comments down below. And I would just love to hear your opinion. You know, are these the kind of shoes you're more gravitating towards, or are you going with something more of a stiffer setup, more of a jump focus setup? Let me know down below. And if you want to see another shoe that's kind of a kindred spirit to the GT Cut 2, the Adidas Trae Young 1, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in the next video.